just got back from G3, and I wanted to thank everyone there for. I don't want this to sound like I'm faulting everyone else who doesn't do this, but I do think sometimes that some of the speakers miss out on some of the real fun of G3 by basically not meeting with anybody. I've lost track of how many hours I have stood outside or inside the rooms there at the Atlanta Convention Center, just talking with people and signing books, taking selfies. I mean, it's funny. It is really interesting how things have changed because now there is almost an understood protocol. If you're next in line, you need to know how to use the person in front of you's cell phone to take pictures. Because, doing this thing, hey, look at it, it's a shoulder, and anybody with a selfie stick, I suppose that'd be a nice self-defense weapon if you train to use it. But most people don't do that. So it's just sort of how it works out is that the next person takes the picture of the person in front of them, and then they give their camera to the next person, and it's just sort of how it works. And we started that on Thursday. No, it was a Thursday, about 9:00 in the morning. And then I left about 3 in the afternoon. I did 4 webcasts, short ones, but 4 webcasts during that time period. Rich went and got some Chick-fil-A for me, and we sat at that point we were at the Sovereign booth. We sat there and ate Chick-fil-A and then went back at it. And what I really like about it is it's interesting. Every year is a little different. Last year, there were a bunch of IFB people, former IFB people. That was the predominant thing that kept coming up was I was Independent Fundamentalist Baptist, and you really helped me to see through that and to get out of that. And that was really, really common. We had a number of former oneness folks this year. And we haven't done anything special on oneness this year, but there were IFB people, former Roman Catholics. I've lost count over the years how many people said I read your King James only book, and then I started reading other stuff, and now I'm Reformed. That's a interesting path to get where you're going, but that's basically how it worked, and so. It is really fascinating to get to meet folks and to take all the pictures and shake all the hands and a number of you had heard my plea, please give me space, please. A few people want to do the fist bump thing. I didn't mind shaking the hands. I had my Sonapure with me before I ate food or anything like that. But it's just very, very enjoyable to have that opportunity to meet with folks. And there are just some folks who just don't do that. There are just some speakers that's not their thing. They're not going to be out there doing that kind of stuff. And but we did, and we moved. We didn't have our own booth this year, so we basically hung out either at Post Tenebris Lux with Jeffrey Rice and his wife and friends and what they were doing. And then one of the first things we did on Thursday is Jeffrey and I had teamed up on getting a Bible for Virginia Cowperthwaite. Her young lady's getting close to finishing her. And by the way, her sister seems to have broken her collarbone yesterday, so pray for them. They're traveling, and that's got to be extremely painful. There's not much you can do about it. I know a lot about that because cyclists, that is the most common cycling injury in a crash, is a broken collarbone. Because you try not to do it, but if you put that arm out, all that weight is going right on this thin little bit of nothing. And so there you go. And so pray for them. But Virginia had one of the pages in her Bible was coming out. She's pretty close to memorizing her 15th book of the New Testament. And so Jeffrey and I had gotten some information and had gotten her a new ESV, a post tenebrous lux version, which means it should last a very, very long time. And so we started off doing that. And then so we hung out over there for a while. Then we were over at Sovereign. And I went back to PTL on Friday after I spoke Friday morning. But then I did have to leave in the afternoon because that evening some of you already saw, because it dropped Sunday night, the program we did on cross politic, where it was Doug Wilson, myself, Virgil Walker, were on the couch together, and basically we talked about a lot of stuff, and the added stuff, the stuff after the stuff that you have to have a subscription to, type thing. Really got into some interesting discussions that are, I think, important and helpful and stuff like that. So we did that as well. And then Friday morning, unfortunately, we had technical issues when I had my opportunity of speaking. I've said often that I'm put early in the morning so that anything I say that causes problems is forgotten by the evening when the big boys get up to speak. But I did Isaiah 6, and I preached from, this isn't it, but it looks like it. I preached from the Greek Septuagint, and this is, if you haven't seen it, this is the Hendrickson 2-volume reader's edition of the Greek Septuagint. And so this is the one that starts with Genesis, Exodus, and but the second volume I left, the one that I preached from, I left with Jeffrey, and I'm going to send him this one. We're actually going to bind these. And this was all I preached from, and the reason I did that, if you get to see it once it's posted, and like I said, there were technical problems. They told you it was okay? They told you it was going to be posted? The sermon? Okay. So I guess they got it, but it didn't live stream correctly. When it came on, there was no audio. I had the wonderful experience of standing there at a pulpit in front of thousands of people, and then all of a sudden, someone's pulling on my belt. I had no earthly idea. Now, everybody else saw him coming, I assume. But the sound guy snuck up behind me because we were getting breakup from, these fancy dancy Britney Spears microphones they make you wear. And I don't know that it helped any. I don't know what he could have even done back there. But if you could just imagine being in the middle of a sermon, all right? And thankfully, I had already live translated the text and had gone through the text, and I was about 3 or 4 verses in, I guess, when he did this. But I just know certain people that would never recover from that. Let's put it that way. I mean, no, not that they turn around and punch somebody. They would just never get back into their train of thought. It would just be derailed. And if you've ever seen a train wreck, that's what would be the result of everything afterwards. Is like, nah, that's the end of that. But thankfully, that's one of the reasons I think the Lord had me grow up doing radio, because stuff would happen on radio that, you just had to be able to keep going. And so I did. And so there you go. Anyhow, but it didn't live stream properly. The end of it did, but not the beginning of it. And so when I got to New York, I mentioned that to Doug McMasters. I was speaking at New Hyde Park Baptist Church on issues about textual criticism and canon issues and stuff like that. But I was preaching the Sunday morning sermon. I've preached at New Hyde Park for decades now, actually, even before Doug was there. I had preached at that church. And so, I mentioned that, and he says, and it was like, well, you could preach it again, and there hopefully won't be any sound issues. And so I did. That's what I did for the Sunday morning service. There was one guy in the audience that had been there, so he had to listen to it twice. But nobody else had, so that wasn't an issue. And so we've already linked to that one. And I sort of like the second one better, personally. Maybe because there wasn't the interruptions, and also because I could see people. It is weird if you've ever spoken in that situation. I even made comments before I preached. I said, I hope they turn the audience lights up some, because it was really dark in there, and I'm not sure exactly why they do that. I'm not sure how you could even read your Bible if there was really sufficient light. It would be difficult for me. Yeah, if everybody's using a phone, I suppose, but for the speaker, you're really not seeing faces. I mean, you can see heads, but with the lights in your eyes and the low light out there, it's sort of hard to see people, and that makes it. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. Let's just put it that way. And so I preached that, and we've already linked to that, and we'll see about when the video comes up, what'll happen with that.